Some wedding nights begin with forever. Others begin with the truth. Emily Carter would remember that sentence for the rest of her life, though she had no idea it was being written inside her heart as the crystal champagne glass slipped from a silver tray and shattered across the polished marble floor of the Sterling Grand Hotel. The sharp sound echoed beneath the towering chandeliers, drawing only a few curious glances before the laughter and music swallowed it again. Outside, Manhattan glittered beneath a warm June sky, while inside the city's most talked-about wedding had become the picture every magazine wanted on its front page. Emily stood quietly at the end of the hallway, one hand resting over the secret only she carried. 10 weeks. That tiny life growing inside her had transformed every dream into something brighter. She had planned to tell Ryan tonight after the last guest left, after the photographers packed away their cameras, after the tuxedos and designer gowns disappeared into elevators and limousines. She had imagined placing the ultrasound picture beside his wedding band and watching the surprise spread across his face. She smiled just thinking about it. Her husband. The word still felt new. Ryan Sterling, America's self-made real estate millionaire, had looked into her eyes only hours earlier and promised that every tomorrow would belong to them. Thousands had applauded. Television crews had recorded every vow. Friends called it the wedding of the year. Even strangers online praised the fairy tale romance between the powerful businessman and the beautiful former elementary school teacher who had somehow captured his heart. Emily believed every word because love often sounds most convincing when it is about to be tested. The ballroom slowly emptied as guests drifted toward waiting cars, still laughing about speeches and dancing. A violinist played the final notes of a familiar love song, while hotel staff quietly reset tables worth more than Emily's first apartment. She looked toward the grand staircase where Ryan had disappeared nearly 15 minutes earlier after saying he needed to answer one important business call. It wasn't unusual. Billion-dollar deals rarely respected wedding schedules. She understood that better than anyone. She wanted tonight to be perfect, so instead of feeling disappointed, she decided to surprise him. The bridal suite waited at the end of the private corridor, decorated with white roses, candles, and handwritten notes from family members wishing them a lifetime of happiness. Emily carried the small velvet box containing the ultrasound photo inside her bouquet bag, already imagining Ryan's reaction. Her heels clicked softly across the marble floor. One step, then another. The music behind her faded until only the distant hum of air conditioning remained. The hallway seemed strangely quiet for a hotel filled with hundreds of guests. Then she heard it. A woman's laughter. Soft at first, familiar enough to make her pause. She frowned, convincing herself another bridal party must have been assigned nearby. But the laughter came again, followed by Ryan's unmistakable voice. Calm, relaxed, different from the polished tone he used during interviews or board meetings. Emily's heartbeat quickened, though she couldn't explain why. She moved closer to the suite door. It had not closed completely. A narrow line of warm golden light stretched across the hallway carpet. She whispered his name once, expecting him to answer immediately. Silence. Then another laugh. Her fingers reached the polished brass handle almost without thinking. The door drifted open another inch. Time slowed in the strange way it does when life quietly divides itself into before and after. Ryan stood near the balcony windows with his jacket removed, smiling at Vanessa Blake, his marketing director. Vanessa adjusted the ribbon on Emily's bridal bouquet, the same bouquet she had carried only hours earlier down the aisle as maid of honor. Ryan looked at Vanessa with a softness Emily had believed belonged only to her. Neither of them noticed the door opening. Neither noticed Emily standing motionless beneath the warm hallway light. The ultrasound picture slipped from her fingers and floated silently onto the carpet. No shouting followed. No dramatic confrontation. The room remained almost peaceful, as if the universe itself refused to interrupt the moment. Emily simply stared. Every promise, every toast, every congratulation from that unforgettable afternoon suddenly felt distant, like photographs fading beneath sunlight. Somewhere far below, another round of applause rose from the hotel lobby as guests celebrated the newlyweds one last time. Emily blinked once, slowly. Her wedding ring felt unexpectedly heavy. She lowered her eyes toward the tiny ultrasound photo resting near the doorway, then back toward the man she had married only hours earlier. She finally understood that the hardest part of betrayal is not discovering a lie. It is realizing how long the truth has been waiting for you to open the right door. Emily did not push the door any farther. She did not make a sound. She simply bent down, picked up the ultrasound photograph with careful fingers, and slipped it back into the small velvet box before quietly stepping backward into the hallway. Every instinct urged her to ask questions, to demand explanations, to hear anything that might make sense of what she had just seen. But another voice inside her, calmer and wiser, whispered that some answers revealed themselves without a single word being spoken. The hallway suddenly felt much colder than it had only minutes earlier. The white roses lining the walls no longer smelled sweet. Even the soft golden lights seemed harsher now, exposing details she had overlooked all evening. Ryan had disappeared several times during the reception. Vanessa had always seemed to know exactly where he was. Their private jokes, their lingering eye contact, their effortless coordination during every speech and every photograph. Emily had dismissed each moment as professional familiarity because trust naturally fills the spaces where doubt refuses to live. She reached the elevator and pressed the button with a hand that remained surprisingly steady. The polished brass doors reflected a bride who no longer recognized herself. Her makeup was still flawless. Her veil still rested perfectly over her shoulders. The diamond wedding ring still sparkled beneath the lights. Nothing on the outside suggested that her future had quietly unraveled behind one half-open hotel door. When the elevator arrived, an elderly couple stepped inside holding hands. They smiled warmly at Emily. "Congratulations, sweetheart," the woman said. "You looked absolutely beautiful tonight." Emily managed a gentle smile. "Thank you. That is very kind of you." The doors closed, and the couple continued talking about their own 50th wedding anniversary. Emily listened without hearing the words. She found herself staring at the illuminated floor numbers, as if each passing level carried her farther away from the woman she had been only 20 minutes earlier. The hotel lobby remained filled with flowers, photographers packing expensive equipment, and guests collecting coats before heading home. Several people recognized her immediately. Friends waved. Business partners offered congratulations. Someone asked where Ryan was because they wanted one last picture with the happy couple. Emily answered every question with the same quiet grace she had carried all evening. Emily walked back through the hotel entrance with the same calm expression that had made hundreds of guests admire her throughout the evening. No one noticed the difference because heartbreak rarely announces itself. It hides behind steady breathing, measured footsteps, and polite smiles. The concierge greeted her warmly. A bridesmaid hurried across the marble floor carrying gift boxes. Somewhere inside the ballroom, another burst of laughter echoed beneath the crystal chandeliers. Life continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Emily slipped her wedding ring into the velvet box beside the ultrasound photograph and closed the lid with quiet determination. She was halfway across the lobby when Ryan finally appeared at the top of the grand staircase. Even from a distance, she recognized the practiced confidence that had made investors trust him and reporters admire him. He scanned the crowded room until his eyes found hers. Relief crossed his face for only a moment before he hurried toward her. "Emily, there you are," he said, lowering his voice as he reached her. "Everyone has been asking where you disappeared to." Emily looked into his familiar blue eyes, searching for the man she thought she had married. She found only someone carefully measuring every word before speaking. "I needed some fresh air," she answered quietly. Ryan nodded too quickly. "I should have told you that business call was taking longer than expected." Vanessa needed to review tomorrow's press schedule before the media interviews. The explanation arrived effortlessly, polished by years of boardroom negotiations. Emily almost admired how naturally it came. "Did she?" Emily asked with surprising calm. Ryan smiled. "You know how she is. Always thinking ahead." For several silent seconds, neither of them moved. Around them, photographers continued packing equipment while hotel employees wheeled flower arrangements towards service elevators. The celebration was ending, yet the performance continued. Emily gently opened the velvet box and held it between them. Ryan's eyes immediately settled on the wedding ring resting inside. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Why is your ring in there?" he asked. Emily did not answer immediately. Instead, she lifted the ultrasound photograph and looked at it one more time before carefully placing it back beside the ring. I was planning to give you something tonight, she said softly. Something that would have changed both of our lives forever. Ryan frowned. Confusion briefly interrupted his confidence. Emily, what are you talking about? She looked directly at him. I went upstairs because I wanted to surprise you. The color slowly drained from his face. For the first time that evening, he stopped speaking. Emily watched understanding arrive without another sentence being necessary. His eyes shifted toward the elevators behind him, as if calculating distances, possibilities, explanations. Silence became heavier than any accusation. Finally, he exhaled. It is not what you think. Emily almost smiled at the familiar phrase. That sentence has probably saved many uncomfortable conversations, she replied. Tonight, it cannot save this one. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice further. You saw something out of context. Did I? She asked gently. Then tell me the context. He hesitated. Seconds stretched between them while guests wandered past without noticing that an entire marriage was quietly dissolving only a few feet away. Vanessa has been under enormous pressure preparing this wedding, Ryan said carefully. She became emotional. I was trying to comfort her. Emily listened without interrupting. Every word seemed chosen with legal precision instead of honesty. Comfort looks different depending on who is watching, she answered. I happen to be watching. Ryan reached toward her hand, but stopped before touching it. Emily, please. Let us go upstairs and talk privately. She slowly shook her head. Private conversations require trust. We ran out of that before I opened the suite door. His jaw tightened. You are making a decision based on one moment. No, Emily replied. I am making a decision based on the moment that explained every other moment I refused to question. Ryan looked away for the first time. Across the lobby, Vanessa emerged from another hallway carrying her evening clutch. She froze the instant she saw them standing together. Emily noticed the brief exchange of nervous eye contact between them. It lasted less than a heartbeat, yet it confirmed more than any confession ever could. Emily closed the velvet box one final time and placed it into Ryan's hands. He instinctively accepted it without opening it. There are two things inside, she said. One represents the promises we made today. The other represents the future I hoped we would share. Ryan stared down at the box with growing uncertainty. What does that mean? Emily stepped backward toward the revolving glass doors. You will understand when you decide to tell yourself the truth. Then she turned, walked into the warm Manhattan night, and left Ryan standing beneath the brilliant hotel lights holding a small velvet box that suddenly felt heavier than everything he had spent a lifetime building. The revolving doors turned slowly behind Emily as she stepped onto the quiet sidewalk, leaving the music, the cameras, and the carefully staged celebration inside the hotel. A cool breeze drifted between the skyscrapers, carrying the distant sound of taxis and late evening traffic. For the first time all day, the city felt honest. It made no promises. It asked for nothing. It simply moved forward, and Emily decided she would do the same. Her phone vibrated again. Ryan's name flashed across the screen, followed by another call, then another. She silenced each one without reading the messages. A few seconds later, her maid of honor, Olivia Bennett, called in obvious confusion. Emily answered after a long pause. Emily, where are you? Everyone is looking for you. Ryan says there was a misunderstanding. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment. Some misunderstandings last 5 minutes, she replied quietly. Others begin long before the wedding. Olivia fell silent. Are you coming back? Emily looked across the street at the glowing skyline reflected in the glass towers. No. She ended the call before another question could follow. A yellow taxi slowed beside the curb, and the driver rolled down his window. Need a ride, miss? Emily nodded and climbed into the back seat. Where to? He asked. She opened her mouth, then realized she no longer had an answer. The penthouse overlooking Central Park was supposed to become her home tonight. Her small apartment lease had ended 2 weeks earlier after Ryan insisted they begin married life together without looking back. Every plan she had made belonged to a future that no longer existed. Could you take me somewhere quiet? She finally asked. The driver glanced at her through the mirror with gentle understanding. I know just the place. 20 minutes later, the taxi stopped outside a boutique hotel overlooking the Hudson River. It was modest compared to the luxury she had just left behind, but its warm lights and peaceful lobby felt strangely comforting. Emily checked into a simple room under her own name without mentioning the wedding that had dominated every society page that morning. When the receptionist congratulated her after recognizing her from the news, Emily only smiled politely and accepted the room key. Inside, the silence wrapped around her like a blanket. She removed her veil and carefully folded it across the back of a chair. The wedding dress still looked flawless beneath the soft bedside lamp. She studied herself in the mirror, wondering how someone could appear exactly the same while feeling completely different. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Ryan. "Please let me explain." 5 words. Emily stared at them before locking the screen. Another notification arrived almost immediately. Then another. By midnight, there were 17 unread messages and 9 missed calls. None of them answered the only question that mattered. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. Room service had delivered a cup of herbal tea she had not ordered. Resting beside it was a handwritten note. Compliments of another guest. "Congratulations on your wedding, and I hope your evening becomes brighter than your day." Emily looked toward the hallway, but whoever had sent it was already gone. For the first time since leaving the hotel, she allowed herself a small smile. Kindness often arrived from strangers when it was missing from the people who knew us best. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup and finally opened the velvet box once more. The empty space where her wedding ring had rested only an hour earlier was now occupied by a folded card Ryan had apparently slipped inside before she walked away. Her heartbeat quickened. She unfolded the cream-colored paper carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably his. It contained only one sentence. "Trust me until tomorrow morning." Emily read it twice. Then a third time. No apology. No explanation. Only another request for faith from the man who had already spent hers. She placed the note beside the ultrasound picture and looked out through the window at the river shimmering beneath the moonlight. Somewhere across the city, Ryan was probably trying to control a story that had already escaped his grasp. Somewhere else, Vanessa was likely wondering how much Emily had actually seen. But neither of them knew about the tiny heartbeat hidden inside that velvet box, or the quiet promise Emily had already made to the child she carried. Whatever tomorrow revealed, she would never again build her future on someone else's version of the truth. Morning arrived wrapped in pale sunlight spilling across the Hudson River, but Emily had not slept for more than a few minutes at a time. Every hour had been interrupted by another vibration from her phone until the battery finally surrendered sometime before dawn. The silence that followed felt almost peaceful. She stood beside the hotel window, still wearing the oversized robe the hotel had provided, watching commuters hurry along sidewalks with coffee cups in their hands. Thousands of ordinary lives were beginning while hers seemed suspended between yesterday and whatever came next. She rested one hand gently over her stomach and remembered the first promise she had whispered to her unborn child only hours earlier. It was the only promise from the wedding that still felt real. After changing into a simple cream sweater and blue jeans purchased from the small boutique inside the hotel, Emily carefully folded her wedding dress into the protective garment bag. She could not bring herself to throw it away. Not yet. Some memories deserved to be stored before they could be understood. As she checked out, the receptionist smiled kindly and handed her a small envelope. "A gentleman stopped by very early this morning," she explained. "He asked us to give you this if you were still here." Emily thanked her and stepped outside before opening it. Inside was a business card with elegant black lettering. Ethan Brooks. Brooks and Harrison Family Law. Written neatly across the back was a short message. "If you ever need someone who values the truth more than appearances, call me." There was no signature beyond his printed name. Emily stared at the card with quiet curiosity. She vaguely recognized the firm from newspaper articles involving high-profile business disputes, but she had never met Ethan Brooks. Before she could think further, another black sedan pulled quietly to the curb across the street. Ryan stepped out before the driver could even open the door. His tie was missing. His jacket hung loosely over one shoulder. And for the first time since she had known him, he looked like a man who had completely lost control of his carefully organized world. "Emily," he called, stopping several feet away. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." She remained where she was. "You had all night." Ryan took another cautious step. "I know how this looks." Emily almost laughed, not from amusement, but from disbelief. "You keep talking about how it looks," she replied calmly. "I have not heard you mention what it is." He rubbed a tired hand across his face. Vanessa has worked with me for years. Things became complicated before the wedding, and I believed ending everything afterward would be easier for everyone. Emily absorbed every word without interrupting. The city moved around them as strangers passed without realizing they were witnessing the quiet ending of a marriage that had lasted less than a day. "Did you ever intend to tell me?" she finally asked. Ryan lowered his eyes. The pause answered before he did. "I was trying to protect you." Emily shook her head slowly. "No, Ryan. You were trying to protect yourself." His shoulders dropped as though the weight of that sentence settled directly upon them. "I never wanted to hurt you." Emily reached into her handbag and removed the folded ultrasound photograph. She held it between two fingers for a moment before offering it toward him. Confused, Ryan accepted it carefully. His eyes widened almost instantly. "Emily," his voice barely rose above a whisper. "You were pregnant." She nodded once. "I still am." He looked from the tiny image to her face, struggling to find words that refused to come. "Why did you not tell me?" Emily answered with heartbreaking honesty. "Because I wanted it to be the happiest surprise of our lives." Ryan closed his eyes, and for several long seconds neither of them spoke. The morning traffic hummed softly around them. Somewhere a ferry horn echoed across the river. Finally he looked back at her. "Please let me fix this." Emily's expression remained gentle but unwavering. "Some things can be repaired," she said. "Trust is different. Once it breaks, every future conversation has to climb over the pieces." She accepted the ultrasound picture back, placed it safely inside her purse, and noticed the business card still resting in her other hand. Ryan followed her gaze. "Who is Ethan Brooks?" he asked quietly. Emily turned the card over without answering. She did not know why a stranger had reached out at exactly the right moment. But for the first time since leaving the ballroom, she felt something unexpected beneath the sadness. Not hope. Not yet. Only the quiet possibility that the next chapter of her life might already be waiting just beyond everything she had lost. Emily watched Ryan remain frozen on the sidewalk long after she walked away. She did not look back again. Some endings became weaker each time they were revisited, and she refused to give yesterday another chance to rewrite itself. Instead, she crossed the street toward a quiet neighborhood cafe where the morning crowd had only begun to gather. The rich aroma of fresh coffee filled the air as people tapped on laptops, discussed meetings, or hurried through breakfast before work. Ordinary conversations surrounded her like a gentle reminder that the world never stopped for one broken heart. She chose a small table beside the window and finally turned the business card over once more. Ethan Brooks. The name felt strangely familiar. Before she could reconsider, she dialed the number. The call connected after the second ring. "Brooks and Harrison," a calm female voice answered. "How may I help you?" Emily hesitated for only a second. "My name is Emily Carter. I received a business card from Mr. Brooks this morning." There was a brief pause. "One moment, please." Soft piano music replaced the silence. Less than 30 seconds later, another voice came on the line. Confident, warm, unhurried. "Mrs. Carter," the man said. "I was hoping you would call." Emily frowned slightly. "Have we met before?" "No," Ethan replied. "But I attended your wedding yesterday as the guest of one of Ryan Sterling's investors. I happened to notice something after you left." Emily remained silent, waiting. "Would you be willing to meet for coffee?" he asked. "There are some things I believe you deserve to know before anyone else controls the story." 45 minutes later, Ethan Brooks entered the cafe, carrying nothing except a slim leather folder. He looked to be in his early 40s. Dressed in a navy suit without the expensive flash that usually followed high-profile attorneys. His calm gray eyes reflected years of listening more than talking. After introducing himself, he sat across from Emily without immediately opening the folder. "First," he said gently, "I am sorry for what happened yesterday." Emily thanked him quietly. "Second," he continued, "I am not here because Ryan hired me. I have never represented him." That surprised her. "Then why are you helping me?" Ethan rested his hands on the table. "Because I have spent 20 years watching people mistake wealth for character. Yesterday, I watched someone with genuine character walk away from extraordinary wealth without creating a scene. That told me everything I needed to know." Emily lowered her eyes, uncertain how to respond. Ethan finally opened the folder. Inside were several newspaper clippings and publicly available corporate filings. "Everything here is legal and public," he explained. Most people simply never bother connecting the pieces. Emily studied the documents. Several companies shared similar addresses. Others listed executives she recognized from Ryan's business circle. One name appeared repeatedly beside Vanessa Blake's. Why is she listed on these companies? Emily asked. Ethan nodded slowly. That is the question I hoped you would ask. He slid another document across the table. During the past 18 months, several real estate investments were quietly transferred into newly formed partnerships. Vanessa became a minority partner in more than one of them. Emily looked up in disbelief. Ryan told me she only managed marketing. According to public records, Ethan replied carefully. Her role became much larger than that. Emily felt the pieces beginning to arrange themselves into a picture she had never imagined. Late business trips, endless strategy meetings, weekend conferences, conversations interrupted whenever she entered the room. None of them had seemed suspicious alone. Together they formed an entirely different story. Ethan closed the folder without overwhelming her further. I am not asking you to make any decisions today, he said. I am asking you to slow down before signing anything or believing any explanation offered in a hurry. Emily thought about Ryan's message asking for trust until tomorrow morning. Tomorrow had arrived. The truth had arrived with it. Her phone buzzed across the table. Another message from Ryan appeared on the screen. Please meet me before my press conference this afternoon. Everything depends on it. Emily looked at the message, then at the folder resting quietly between her and Ethan. One man was asking for more time. The other was offering more truth. For the first time since the wedding, she realized those were not the same thing. Emily did not answer Ryan's message immediately. She slipped the phone face down on the cafe table while Ethan quietly gathered the documents back into his leather folder. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Outside, people crossed the intersection beneath changing traffic lights, completely unaware that a single unanswered text message could alter the future of one of the city's most admired businessmen. Ethan finally broke the silence. If you decide to meet him, do not go alone. Emily looked up. Do you think he is dangerous? Ethan shook his head. No, I think he is desperate. Desperate people often make emotional decisions because they are trying to regain control of a story they can no longer manage. Emily slowly nodded. The distinction mattered. Ryan had always been calm when every variable remained within his control. Yesterday had changed that. She picked up her phone and typed a brief reply. I will meet you. 1 hour. Public place. The response arrived less than 30 seconds later. Thank you. The location was a private conference lounge inside Sterling Tower, the headquarters that carried Ryan's family name across polished granite walls visible from several blocks away. Ethan glanced at the address and quietly smiled. Interesting choice. Emily raised an eyebrow. Why? Because he chose his building instead of somewhere neutral. Even now, he feels safer on familiar ground. Emily folded the phone into her purse. Will you come? Ethan answered without hesitation. I will wait nearby. This conversation belongs to you, but you should not have to face uncertainty alone. 1 hour later, Emily stepped through the revolving doors of Sterling Tower. The elegant lobby looked exactly as she remembered from countless charity dinners and holiday parties. Employees greeted her with warm smiles, unaware that they were welcoming the woman who had disappeared from the wedding reception only the night before. A receptionist escorted her toward a glass conference room overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Ryan was already waiting. His jacket hung neatly over the back of a chair. Several unopened bottles of sparkling water sat untouched beside a polished presentation screen that remained dark. He stood the moment Emily entered. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. Emily remained near the doorway instead of taking the chair across from him. You said everything depended on this meeting. Ryan nodded. It does. He reached into a desk drawer and removed a thick envelope. Before you hear rumors from anyone else, I want you to have these. Emily accepted the envelope but did not open it immediately. What is it? Financial disclosures, partnership agreements, property records, everything connected to Vanessa. Emily slowly looked up at him. Why now? Ryan inhaled deeply before answering. Because I should have told you months ago. He paused, searching for words that sounded less like excuses and more like honesty. The business relationship became personal, and instead of ending one relationship before beginning another difficult conversation, I convinced myself I could untangle everything after the wedding. Every day I delayed made the next day harder. Emily listened carefully. There was regret in his voice, but regret alone could not rewrite choices already made. She finally opened the envelope. Several documents matched the records Ethan had shown her only hours earlier. Others revealed additional investment partnerships, consulting agreements, and private communications authorizing Vanessa to represent Ryan in negotiations worth millions of dollars. None of the papers were illegal. All of them confirmed one painful reality. The relationship had extended far beyond simple business. "You built another future while asking me to believe in ours," Emily said softly. Ryan lowered his eyes. "Yes." The single word settled heavily between them because it carried no defense, no explanation, only truth. At that exact moment, Ryan's assistant hurried into the conference room, stopping abruptly after noticing Emily. "I am so sorry to interrupt," she said nervously. "The media team is downstairs. Someone leaked internal partnership documents this morning. Reporters are asking questions about Miss Blake's executive role." Ryan closed his eyes briefly. "Give me 10 minutes. The assistant nodded and quietly left the room. Emily looked toward the envelope in her hands, then back at Ryan. "The story has already started without us." Ryan gave a faint, exhausted smile. "It seems that way." Emily carefully placed every document back inside the envelope and closed it. For the first time since entering the building, she realized that the greatest consequences were no longer waiting somewhere in the future. They had already begun, and somewhere beyond the conference room walls, people were asking questions that neither wealth nor carefully written statements could answer. Emily left the conference room carrying the envelope beneath one arm, but she did not feel victorious. She felt lighter. There was a quiet difference between winning an argument and finally seeing the truth without illusion. As the elevator descended through the glass tower, she watched the Manhattan skyline drift upward beyond the transparent walls. Every floor carried employees rushing between meetings, answering phones, preparing presentations, and discussing quarterly profits. None of them realized that the company around them had entered a very different kind of forecast. When the elevator doors opened, Ethan Brooks was waiting exactly where he had promised, seated in the lobby with a cup of untouched coffee. He stood as soon as he saw Emily. "How did it go?" he asked gently. Emily handed him the envelope without saying a word. Ethan glanced through only the first few pages before quietly closing it again. "He disclosed everything?" Emily nodded. "Everything he chose to admit." Ethan understood immediately. That usually means there is still more to discover. Before Emily could respond, every television mounted above the reception area switched to the same breaking business report. A financial news anchor appeared beside photographs of Ryan Sterling and Vanessa Blake. The headline read, "Questions raised about executive partnerships inside Sterling Development Group." Reporters described newly surfaced corporate records showing previously undisclosed investment relationships involving senior executives. Legal analysts emphasized that no accusations of criminal conduct had been made, but shareholders were demanding clarification regarding governance and disclosure practices. Employees throughout the lobby gradually slowed their conversations as they watched the report. Phones began ringing almost simultaneously at the reception desk. A group of investors entered through the revolving doors wearing expressions far more serious than those arriving only an hour earlier. Emily quietly looked away from the screens. She had not leaked the documents. She had not contacted reporters. The truth had simply found daylight on its own schedule. Ethan observed the growing activity around them. "Stories like this rarely remain inside conference rooms," he said calmly. "Once questions begin, people start checking records they ignored yesterday." Emily exhaled slowly. "I never wanted revenge." Ethan smiled with quiet understanding. Justice and revenge often look similar from a distance. The difference is that justice does not need anger to survive. Before either of them moved, Ryan emerged from a private elevator surrounded by members of his communications team. His expression remained composed, but the confidence Emily had always associated with him had softened into visible exhaustion. As he crossed the lobby, his eyes briefly met hers. He stopped only for a moment while advisors continued speaking around him about statements, interviews, and investor calls. "Emily," he said quietly. She stepped toward him, leaving several respectful feet between them. "I heard the news." Ryan nodded once. "It will be a long day." Emily looked at him with genuine compassion, surprising even herself. I hope you tell the truth today. Ryan lowered his gaze before answering. For the first time in a long time, that is exactly what I intend to do. He offered a faint, tired smile, then continued toward the waiting cameras without another word. Emily watched him disappear through the revolving doors into a wall of flashing lights and microphones. She remembered the photographers celebrating their wedding less than 24 hours earlier. The same cameras that once captured promises were now recording consequences. Life moved faster than anyone imagined. Ethan gently touched the edge of the envelope, still resting in her hands. There is one more thing you should know. Emily looked at him. This morning I asked my research team to review several additional filings connected to those partnerships. We found correspondence indicating that some transactions were delayed because Ryan refused to finalize certain ownership transfers. Emily frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means the story may be more complicated than it first appeared. Poor decisions were made. Serious betrayals happened. But not every line points in the same direction. Emily remained silent, considering his words as another notification appeared on her phone. This time it was not from Ryan. It was from her doctor reminding her about the first prenatal appointment scheduled for the following morning. She rested her hand gently over her stomach and smiled for the first time that day. Beyond the headlines, beyond the business records, beyond the broken marriage, one quiet heartbeat continued moving faithfully toward tomorrow. And for Emily, that was finally the future that mattered most. 2 years later, the first light of spring filtered through the tall windows of a small community library on Manhattan's Upper West Side, painting soft patterns across rows of children's books. Emily Carter sat on a colorful reading rug surrounded by smiling preschoolers who listened with complete attention as she finished the final page of a picture book about courage. When the story ended, tiny hands burst into applause, and a little boy asked the question children always seem to ask. Did the princess live happily ever after? Emily smiled warmly before answering. She learned that happiness is not a place someone gives you. It is something you build yourself. At that moment, a little girl with bright blue eyes ran toward her, carrying a crayon drawing filled with sunshine, flowers, and 2 stick figures holding hands. Mommy, look what I made. Emily lifted 4-year-old Grace into her arms and kissed the top of her head. It is beautiful. The drawing showed only 2 people because that was the world Grace had always known. It was peaceful, honest, and filled with ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because they were real. Outside the library, reporters no longer waited for Emily. Society magazines had moved on to newer headlines, newer scandals, and newer weddings. Time had quietly done what time always does. It separated noise from truth. Sterling Development Group still existed, though under different leadership after shareholders demanded sweeping governance reforms. Ryan had resigned as chief executive officer almost a year earlier and accepted full responsibility for the failures in judgment that had damaged both his company and his personal life. Public investigations found no criminal wrongdoing, but the loss of investor confidence changed everything. Vanessa quietly left the company months before the restructuring was completed, disappearing from business headlines almost as quickly as she had entered them. Emily had never spoken publicly about any of it. She never gave interviews. She never wrote a book. She never tried to win the court of public opinion because she had already chosen something more valuable than public approval. She chose peace. As the children hurried outside with their parents, Ethan Brooks waited near the entrance carrying 2 cups of coffee. Over the past 2 years, he had become one of Emily's closest friends, offering thoughtful guidance through legal paperwork, difficult decisions, and the long process of rebuilding a life that once seemed impossible to imagine. He handed her a cup with a familiar smile. How was story time? Emily laughed softly. Much easier than explaining adults. Ethan looked toward Grace chasing bubbles across the sidewalk. She is growing fast. Too fast, Emily answered. They stood quietly watching the little girl laugh beneath the bright afternoon sky. Across the street, a black sedan slowed before continuing through the intersection. Ryan sat inside, dressed far more simply than the confident executive who had once dominated magazine covers. He noticed Emily and Grace almost immediately. For a brief moment, his driver asked whether he wished to stop. Ryan looked through the window as Grace laughed while trying to catch another floating bubble. Then he slowly shook his head. Keep driving. The sedan disappeared into traffic without a single word exchanged. Emily never noticed it. She was too busy kneeling beside her daughter, helping her chase another bubble drifting toward the park. Some distances could never be measured in miles. They were measured in choices. Later that evening, after Grace had fallen asleep, Emily opened a small wooden keepsake box resting on her bedroom shelf. Inside lay the folded ultrasound photograph, the wedding ring she had never worn again, and the handwritten note Ryan once left asking her to trust him until tomorrow morning. She looked at each item one final time before gently closing the lid. They no longer represented pain. They represented the moment she discovered that walking away from the wrong future is sometimes the first step toward the right one. She returned the box to the shelf, switched off the bedroom light, and quietly closed the door. In the peaceful silence of her home, surrounded by honesty instead of appearances, Emily finally understood that some people spend their lives searching for the perfect wedding, while others discover that the greatest blessing begins the moment they find the courage to leave the perfect illusion behind.